Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Dakota Frandsen. Today is June 21st, 2019. It's finally Friday, my friends. Tonight, in sort of conglomeration with the latest episode of Dakota's Declassified, in which I share details of the very first public investigation I've ever done. I wanted to go into detail about hauntings. Specifically, the types of hauntings one may face. Just to give you a brief understanding of how the categorization many groups use works. Because during some conversations I've had with some of you, and this is not to target anyone or anybody in any way, shape, or form, you don't really seem to understand how it works. So I decided, why not make a little episode about it. Strictly for tonight's episode, we are going to focus on, quote-unquote, human hauntings. Incidents where the origins of the paranormal activity are strictly human. The spirits you're dealing with are not anything special. They are human, just like you and I. And they should be dealt with and respected as such. This question was actually submitted, not necessarily in regards to being presented as a topic on this show, but nevertheless, it was presented by a listener just like you. If you have an idea for an episode topic, or even if you are getting sick and tired of hearing me all the time and perhaps want to start hearing some opinions from other people, have an idea for a guest, let me know. I'm a one-man operation, and I can't think of everything. So if you have an idea for a future episode, whether it's just a simple topic, or you have an individual in mind you would like to hear me interview, let me know. Episode comments, message me through my website, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. I'm all over the place. And if I don't get to you right away, don't assume that I'm ignoring you. I do try to read all the messages I get, but I'm just a one-man operation, and I don't focus solely on the paranormal in regards to helping people. And if I don't feel that there is precedence or any sort of danger in regards to your case, I may not take it as a priority. Not a lot of people realize this. Not a lot of people who've seen it in action stick around, but incidents in my life come in waves. There's really good highs, really nasty lows. And sometimes when those lows came around, some people didn't make it out alive. So all I ask is that you do please respect that. I've noticed some of you say, oh, I'm not going to send you anything more if you're not going to talk back. It's like, well, dude, I got shit to do. So here's tonight's topic. Categorization of human hauntings. If you believe your home has been haunted, and perhaps want to get an idea of what you're dealing with, this may be the show for you. So do listen in. You're going to want to hear this. Hey everyone, Dakota Frandsen here, specialist of the strange. I just wanted to come with you real quick about potentially doing your own podcast. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? Maybe you got a lot of questions like, how do I record? How do I get my show into all these apps that are out there? How can I make money? There are probably several thousand other questions about getting this show off the ground that you have been formulating and communicating in your mind. And I'm here to tell you that there is a very simple answer to this. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing your show. And best of all, it is 100% free. Get all the perks from the other guys without having to pay for subscription fees. And best of all, it is easy. And in fact, Anchor can match you up with sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast right now, which means you can get paid doing what you love. Isn't that the fucking dream, my friends? In fact, that's actually what I'm trying to do right now by reading this ad for you. It is amazing. It helps ease the process for guests, putting on music, whatever you want to do. So if you want to start your podcast, make some money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and several other fabulous people already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. And I cannot wait to hear you on the air. In most cases, oftentimes you will hear one of three terms commonly used to describe hauntings: residual, intelligent, and poltergeist. If you are unfamiliar with the terms, they go as follow. Residual type hauntings act as if they are memories being played on a loop. Some sources I've worked with try to say it's like just the types of hauntings are like watching a movie over and over again. Many groups would say that traumatic events in the right sort of setting, often where there's an overabundance of quartz or limestone, can be imprinted on the environment as a residual type haunt. How do you know that this might be the case? Well, the spirit in question doesn't really act like you're around, doesn't notice that there are changes. If you try to communicate with it, it is very unlikely you'll get a response. One thing I personally don't like about how it's often described is how traumatic events is often emphasized in regards to describing situations where you might be dealing with a residual type haunting. In reality, and I have seen this and might have documented this on quite a few occasions, to where I can say this in confidence. But your simple, everyday routine, where you get up, make breakfast, brush your teeth, go to work, blah 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 blah, if in the right environment, can be imprinted on the environment as a residual type haunting. You pass on, those still left behind all of a sudden notice that certain things are happening that only you would do. Nothing particularly special, none of that. Perhaps it's a certain way you hum a song when you're in a good mood, or a certain type of perfume. Oftentimes, these types of situations are merely believed to be just implications of the grieving process. You miss the person that you associate those things with. Now, for this, I used the term imprint a couple of times. This is going to be important overall with all three types of these hauntings, which I'll explain more in a little bit. But for right now, let's get through basic definitions. Intelligent type haunts are exactly what they sound like. The spirits in question notice things are changing around them, can try to communicate with you, often do, but you're just not paying attention or can't hear them quite right, will interact with you and interact with said changes from earlier. They can move objects around if they happen to be particularly OCD. They can affect those around them. They can have full-on conversations. There have been incidents where you might hear the famous online stories where people believe that the spirit of an elderly woman who died in the house helped save the lives of their very young children by warning the parents something was wrong. This has happened on multiple occasions. And oftentimes, intelligent type haunts aren't necessarily malicious. Now, if they happen to be a sort of prankster type in life, they might try to figure out a few ways to try to get a little scare out of you, but they don't mean it to be anything harmful. I know a few cases I've personally been involved, tied to, that have done just that. In fact, they promised to do just that just before they passed away. Knowing. And they promised these type of things because they knew about my talents. Intelligent type haunts seem to be attached. It's a common term often used, and it is what I meant by the imprinting I mentioned with residual haunts to certain places, certain objects, and sometimes certain people. Usually, these haunting locations where you have intelligent type haunt situations usually involve places of great importance. Maybe, well, there's the cliche, it was the place they died. It could be a place where they met their first love, where they went to school. Something about our own energy outputs seem to allow us to tether ourselves to certain locations, objects, and people. Now, as for objects, it could be a favorite pocket knife, a favorite book, a favorite shirt. Essentially anything that was of great importance to that particular individual. Again, I will explain how the attachment process seems to work, as well as a few other theories that are tossed around due to how these hauntings manifest. I fucking hate when it does that. Sorry about that. What was I doing? Yes. Poltergeist type haunts. The cliche. Heavy objects being thrown around the room. The weird shadows scratching on the walls. The cliche stuff you would expect out of a horror flick. Poltergeists, the activity is often sporadic. You can't exactly tell what seems to be triggering it most of the time, unless you really do some digging. And it seems, in most cases, that psychological trauma is, in fact, a huge factor. Intelligent type haunts are often described to be able to lift and move around objects up to about roughly 5 pounds. Poltergeist type haunts, they can move shit a lot heavier. And they can often be harmful. When it comes to these types of haunts, I honestly hate using that as the label. I really do. Because of what normally causes it. The causes behind poltergeist haunts is usually someone living. A few of you who have attended my previous appearances have probably heard stories where I describe a condition known as post-traumatic psychosomatic manifestation, or better yet, Carrie syndrome, named after the Stephen King novel. For those of you who don't know, Carrie is a girl raised by an overly religious and abusive mother who undergoes a series of traumatic events which seem to awaken psychokinetic abilities. Poltergeist type haunts are exactly that. The most common factors seem to be environments rich with quartz and limestone, in someone, usually a female, and in most cases, the girl is usually described as in their early teens to late 20s. I've seen this happen with women up to their mid 40s. These women or young girls are under some sort of heavy emotional stress. Some groups say that it can be something as mundane or common as just a bad breakup. But in my research, oftentimes the trauma is repetitive. It's not one-off situations. If it was a one-off situation, it was something that was to the very extreme. Repetitive abuse at home, bullies at school, the pent-up energy, the emotions, the stress becomes too much. Then soon it starts to reflect within the environment around them. Whether it is multiple spirits acting at once, the living and simply feeding off of the female I mentioned, who should be more properly categorized as the catalyst. Whether it's multiple spirits feeding off of the catalyst, one spirit trying to protect the catalyst, and inevitably, and from time to time, causing a supernatural tag team, so to speak, or the catalysts themselves possessing latent psychokinetic abilities. Which one of these outcomes is taking place is very difficult to determine. But nearly all cases require some sort of therapeutic treatment for the catalyst subject. And while, yes, I didn't mention it is usually a female, I should correct myself and say from about the age of 12 to their mid-40s, it is possible, though less likely, for men to exhibit the exact same situations. Whether this is the conditioning where men are more likely to release their pent-up anger in some way by doing something stupid, getting aggressive, getting into fights, where women are more likely to keep it bottled up out of fear of showing some sort of weakness, that can be up for debate. Personally, I'd rather not make those conclusions until a case itself is presented and I can do a more thorough examination of everybody involved. So those are the basic foundations for each type of haunt. How do you know what a spirit's going to be? Or how do paranormal groups decide what a spirit's going to be? Well, they usually use those categorizations by basing it off of the criteria I just mentioned. However, the cases aren't always that easy. I'll explain more after this commercial break. And we're back. Before the commercial break, I described the basic criteria for the different types of hauntings. The reason why I decided to do this episode is because a lot of people seem to get the misconception that a spirit can transform between the certain categories that are present. And while there are more categories out there, the ones we are talking about for tonight strictly deal with human subjects. And much like human nature itself, things are not so black and white. There are cases where you might think you're dealing with a residual type haunt, and the second you start to try to talk to it and interact with it, something triggers to where they realize, oh wait, you're here. And there's times where you think you're going to get intelligent type conversations, and it might seem like that at first, but yet nothing is really happening to suggest it's aware of what's going on around it. And there's times where a spirit may seem calm at first, but then all of a sudden something happens to where the activity escalates. This can be an environmental change, house remodeling, or the spirit took a sort of protective nature towards someone in the house, and that person was hurt. Therefore, the spirit is feeding off of that type of energy. It can be difficult to exactly pinpoint if you try to limit it down to certain terms. And that's why I honestly don't really care for this categorization system. If anything, it's more to describe what the spirits are doing. And because of this variant nature behind how the spirits manifest, how the spirits interact, it leads to a lot of disputes among what exactly ghosts are. Hence the often disputed claims to where spirits can not really be explored by mainstream science. I have tried on a few occasions to pitch new definitions that fit all the criteria, but something always just seems to be off. It could also be a case where I'm simply overthinking it, trying to make sure I cover all my bases, and maybe I'm missing something so simple. But anyway, I mentioned how residual type haunts can often turn intelligent the second they realize someone is interacting with them. The best situation I can compare this to is if you happen to be from a touristy type area, you're just going about your day, taking care of errands as you normally would, but then all of a sudden you're not really registering what you're doing. You've done it so many times that it's become habit. You don't really register what you're doing. You know very well that you're doing it. You just don't really register it because you've done it so repetitively. Until one day you happen to be out and about and you get stopped by a tourist asking for directions. I do hope that paints a clear enough picture for you. In these residual intelligent haunts, it's also been seen, according to how the spirits responded themselves, that they may seem to be mentally stuck in a certain time period, yet they're able to interact with people around them. situations like these that have led some paranormal investigators to pitch the idea that ghosts are simply manifestations of glitches within time. We are somehow being able to see and interact with people in the past. How they manifest is mere projections. On the quantum level, because of how time itself flows within a four-dimensional space, it would be possible for certain currents to intersect at weird times, simply because they have more directions to flow. But then again, sometimes the situation may be as simple as someone just kind of off doing their own thing, not really paying attention to what's going on around them until someone says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And in some cases where the spirits in question were said to have ties to the spiritualism community, to early forms of ghost hunting in their lifetime, you can't exactly rule out the possibility that the second they realize that what the investigators at the scene are doing is basically a revamped version of what they did in their life, you can't exactly rule out the possibility that the spirit themselves kind of sat back to see how things changed because something piqued their interest. Intelligent type haunts, most cases, they're pretty laid back people. They realize that they're no longer living. They don't really have a say in what goes on anymore. But however, you do get the occasional case where they seem to get ticked off and things start to happen. You may decide to remodel certain parts of the house. They may not like it, and blah, 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 blah. If cases like that show up, you have to assert your dominance. Show no fear whatsoever. And usually you can get the opposing party to break and leave you be. Spirits don't necessarily turn into one type of haunt or another. These are human type haunts. They can be influenced by their environment just as easily as they were in their living stages. That's why I always suggest that taking some time to read up on basics human psychology can give you kind of an edge on how to deal with certain situations. Poltergeist type haunts vary themselves in how they manifest. Like I said, you could easily have a spirit who is well aware of what's going on, but something is essentially pissing them off, and they retaliate. What a lot of them don't realize is that sometimes if they retaliate too hard, generate too much fear, they may attract something may notice what's going on and decide to add a little fuel to the fire. But that's another topic for another episode. A human catalyst can apply to any hauntings themselves. Like how spirits allegedly mess with electronics to get an energy boost, they also can feed off of energy our own bodies give off. And that energy itself can be affected by our emotional states. So if we're ticked off and we're given that kind of vibe, they might either feel threatened, feel like we're a threat to them, and they may retaliate, or they may retaliate out of fear. Or they may just simply back up and say, whoa, don't mess with that asshole. It's hard to say without having some form of concrete communication that isn't easily disputed as technical glitches, audio editing, situations of that sort. The ideas of trying to test paranormal phenomenon within controlled environments, it's a good start, but the simple nerves of the living and the dead involved in those types of experiments could easily throw off the results because they are just that sensitive. How to deal with these haunts? Sage is a common practice, but if you don't know what you're doing or you don't follow it up with anything, sage could essentially be like a cheap bug spray. It may kill off some of the things you got in your house at the moment. It might ward off a few small things for a little bit, but eventually it wears off and the problem returns. Confronting the spirits, if they are in fact causing problems, head on. Just saying, hey, yo, knock your shit off. Sometimes that can be as effective as an exorcism. Other cases, the emotion that's tied to prayer, religious chants, and the electromagnetic changes that come from those can affect how a spirit can manifest. In fact, it has actually been found. Little fun fact in regards to prayer. I've mentioned this on previous episodes, but this also applies here. It has been noted on quite a few occasions that areas of mass prayer can affect electromagnetic frequencies. They can make them several times stronger. And it is possible, in fact, it is most likely that these electromagnetic changes can affect, and do, in fact, affect the environment, as well as how things, on a metaphysical level, so to speak, can swing your way. In dealing with poltergeist-type haunts, for example, you can pray your problems away, but you also have to eliminate the source of the problem. If you're in a situation of domestic violence, if you're dealing with negative family members, if you have a job that just runs you dry and constantly aggravates you and you start to wonder whether or not it's actually worth it, it may be simply time for a change. I'll have more on these subjects after this commercial break. Now, how do all these hauntings come into play? So far, it seems like the only common denominator are energy imprints that we leave throughout the course of our lifetime. Can we affect how our energy gets left upon the environment? Yeah. It's affected every moment that we are alive. From the moments we sleep to the highs and lows, to loop-de-loops and flipper-floops and Donald Dupes that we all face in this life. With those last two phrases mean. I'm not 100% sure, but you know what? But you know what I'm talking about, right? This whole roller coaster ride. The energy imprints that we have, that we give off. Rewind. The energy in which we give off during our lifetime. When we're experiencing the highs, new love, the birth of our first child, a new job opportunity, getting a reward for something. I mean, getting real rewards, not participation trophies. To lows of losing a loved one, going through battle. All of the high and lows of heavy emotion seem to leave energy imprints upon the environment. And just like how different metals can conduct electricity with varying types of efficiencies, different types of materials can reflect back those very energies in various strengths. If you look at some of the locations often considered some of the most haunted, one of the highest common factors amongst them all is a heavy presence of quartz, whether it's in the natural geography of the location or if it's in the very building materials. Several Native American tribes have even associated quartz with spiritual energies. And it is possible, if bent correctly, any material can conduct and transfer energy amongst a multi-dimensional space, not just the 3 dimensions we are familiar with, but even higher and higher frequencies. And as I've stated in previous episodes, it is possible that with our knowledge, as we gain knowledge over our various lifetimes, we can learn how to manipulate these energies to alter our own forms. Certain individuals who suffer from mental illness, such as dissociative identity disorder, or previously known as multiple personalities, have also been noted to manifest as different types of spirits, all because those different personalities left different energy imprints. And it is also possible that with the same mechanics behind this, we have what are known as tulpas, thought forms. Energy forms given sentient life through mere thought. It is also this very foundation that allows us to return to this earth after our demise, to be able to look upon our loved ones even long after we are gone, and for they to sense us as well. I have often wondered how much I've studied these things, how much I've taken them on. If my own appearance would be altered, if I would be able to gain a shortcut, some of the abilities that higher dimensional beings are so said to possess. Or if the abilities I possess now seem to originate because I have already done this before. It's hard to say, really. Perhaps it'll be something that we all won't learn more about until it is time we may face our demise. As for the other types of hauntings, they are strictly environmental-based hauntings. Spirits from the elements. And of demonic influence. Demonic and angelic influence, I should say. But these are topics that would probably be best to explain more in depth in future episodes. Come back after one more commercial break. Then I'll leave you be for the night. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's episode. Before I leave you be for the night, I wanted to give you some updates. Again, I wanted to give those of you who expressed your concerns when I mentioned on previous episodes that something happened towards the end of my road trip that kind of hit hard. I want to express my gratitude for all of you. A lot of you also tend to ask what the titles of my books are, despite having resources available right on my website, DakotaFrandsen.com. So I decided to make modifications that haven't yet gone live. On my website, you will soon find a merchandise button towards the top. And it will give you a sort of catalog for all my books, movies I've been a part of, music, as well as fun merchandise, as well as a few fun tools from my affiliates. The catalogs will take you to links to how you can purchase them and go on your own adventures. I truly do appreciate all of you that have stuck by me through everything. Whether you have been with me from the very beginning, or you're just recently joining in. Please do help by spreading this video and others of mine that you find how should I put this? Be sure to share any of my content that you love with your friends and family and help get the word out there. Let's get as many of us on board to chase after the truth. Then perhaps we can really start making the difference in the lives of others. I am Dakota Frandsen. I will see you all next time. Be sure to stay tuned for further episodes, because I have some exciting content you aren't going to want to miss. And there's a slight chance something may retaliate by me speaking out. I'll explain more when that episode comes. Until then, stay safe, have a fun weekend, and I'll see you next time.